The Great American Deception: 150 Years of Political Theater Under the United States Corporation. For the past 150 years, every so-called politician operating within Washington, D.C. has functioned not as a true representative of the people, but as a carefully managed actor performing within a corporate framework known as the United States Corporation. This transformation began when the original constitutional republic, founded in 1776 upon the divine principles of liberty, self-governance, and natural law, was quietly supplanted by a corporate entity through a series of legislative and financial maneuvers, beginning with the Act of 1871. From that moment onward, the seat of government ceased to operate under the organic constitution and instead began functioning as a for-profit corporation, beholden not to the sovereign people, but to private interests, international bankers, and global financiers. Every president, senator, and representative since has unknowingly, or in many cases deliberately, played their part on the grand stage of illusion, bound by oaths not to the republic, but to the corporate structure masquerading as lawful government. The political parties became nothing more than competing divisions of the same corporate entity, selling narratives to keep citizens divided and distracted while the machinery of control expanded behind the scenes. In this theater of deception, laws were converted into statutes, rights into privileges, and citizens into assets, managed through legal fictions known as the straw man, such as social security numbers and birth certificates. The illusion deepened further in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve System, a privately owned central banking cartel disguised as a government institution. With the stroke of a pen, the constitutional power of Congress to issue and regulate currency was handed over to private bankers who began printing money out of thin air and lending it back to the government at interest. This single act of treachery placed the American people in perpetual debt servitude, as every dollar issued was borne as debt owed to the very institution that created it. In the same year, the Internal Revenue Service was quietly established to enforce this financial enslavement, ensuring that the labor and productivity of the American people would serve as collateral for an ever-expanding system of debt and taxation. The IRS, operating as a collection arm of the Federal Reserve, weaponized the people's own earnings against them, turning taxation into a tool of coercion rather than contribution. Together, the Federal Reserve and the IRS formed the twin pillars of economic bondage, one printing debt, the other extracting tribute, ensuring that the wealth of the nation flowed upward into the hands of few when citizens were kept distracted by the illusion of democracy and prosperity. The next great deception came 2 decades later in March 1933. Shortly after taking office, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, compelling all Americans to surrender their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve in exchange for paper currency. This unprecedented decree effectively criminalized the private ownership of real, sound money and severed with the people's direct link to tangible wealth. By forcing the public to trade gold for debt-based notes, the government consolidated control over the nation's wealth and placed citizens under a purely fiat system or trust rather than substance. 1 year later, the Gold Reserve Act of 1934 was passed, transferring ownership of gold held by the Federal Reserve to the U.S. Treasury and revaluing gold from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. This deliberate devaluation quietly stole nearly half of the purchasing power of every dollar overnight, enriching the banking class while further enslaving the working class through inflation. The final blow to sound money came in 1971, when President Richard Nixon closed the gold window, ending the convertibility of U.S. dollars into gold for foreign governments. The action was carried out through a presidential directive announced publicly on August 15, 1971. This act, known as the Nixon Shock, officially terminated the Bretton Woods system and completed America's transformation into a purely fiat monetary regime, where the value of money depended entirely on government decree rather than intrinsic worth. Intrinsic worth refers to the inherent tangible value of a medium or of exchange, just such as gold or silver, that possesses independent substance, scarcity, and universal desirability. Under a gold-backed system, each unit of currency represented a specific claim on a physical asset held in the reserve, ensuring that money retained a stable and objective value grounded in the natural limits of precious metals. By severing the link, the dollar became a paper promise backed only by the confidence and authority of the issuing government, opening the door to unlimited money creation, inflationary pressures, and the gradual erosion of purchasing power over time. From that moment on, the dollar became not a measure of value, but an instrument of control. Its worth rising and falling according to the whims of central bankers and global financiers who manipulate debt, interest, and inflation as tools of economic domination. No longer tied to the discipline of gold, of the boundaries, or tangible assets, the currency became a weaponized mechanism of policy, allowing those in power to expand credit, engineer booms and busts, and redistribute wealth through invisible taxation. Through the manipulation of monetary supply in global markets, the dollar evolved into a lever of geopolitical influence, used to reward allies, punish adversaries, and bind nations into a web of perpetual dependence. What is about to unfold in the coming months will shatter this illusion for millions of Americans as long-hidden truths surface, exposing the collusion, the contracts, and the counterfeit authority that have enslaved the people under maritime and commercial law for decades. When the curtain finally falls and the people see that the actors they once trusted were performing roles scripted by shadow powers, it will mark the most profound awakening in American history, a return not just to the truth of what was lost, but to the lawful republic that was never meant to die. The revelation will ignite a collective reckoning unlike any before, as the people awaken to their inherent sovereignty and the divine law that supersedes all man-made deception. Out of the ashes of corruption will rise a renewed covenant between Creator and creation, a restoration of liberty, justice, and truth under the banner of a reborn republic.